So I'm really pleased Simon could make the time for this conversation today. So let me just briefly introduce Simon, and then I'll talk about the theme for this conversation. So Simon's someone who I met when I was working with the Premier League, and Simon comes from a successful career as a player and a coach and coach developer in elite sport. So my understanding, Simon, is you spent sort of 31 years with the Lawn Tennis Association, and when I met you, you were heading up the performance coach education and development team. And since then, you've moved more broadly into elite sports. So my understanding is, as well as the Premier League, you continue to work with tennis with the Queen's Club Foundation. You're also working with Chelsea Football Club and Chelsea Women's Football Club as well. So I hope I'm doing your career a bit of justice there, very high level, but to give people a sense of where you're coming from. And, the conversations I was having with Simon, coming from a coach from sort of leadership in business, and then meeting Simon and talking about coach development, I was really keen to hear from Simon his reflections around the parallels between these two fields based on his experience. So thanks again, Simon, for making the time today.
No, thank you, Damion. Pleasure.
So please feel free, if there are any burning questions you have, just put them on the chat panel. But I'm just going to really start this conversation, Simon, with inviting you to perhaps look back on your experiences as a coach in elite sport. And, as I know I'm sort of asking you, sort of throwing you in there straight away, but just in terms of reflecting back, what are some of the I suppose the key learning, the key experiences that you connect to when I ask that question?
Okay, thank you, Damion, and welcome to everybody that's listening here. I think the key features of elite sport. So when I think about that, Damion, I'm looking at from a tennis and football perspective, but mainly tennis. My most of my career has been in tennis, and it's only of late that I've moved to the world of football. And I think that as I'm talking, there's many comparisons that you can draw for business coaching. But it's mainly in a tennis individual way. And interestingly for me in my tennis life, the first book that I ever got as a young tennis player, which was extremely informative for me and helpful, and then in coaching, was in actual fact this edition of the Inner Game of Tennis. So it was really amazing for me to see that as a text that's used in your work in later years. I think that so both tennis and football, whilst they're played very differently, are very similar in many ways. They're both very traditional sports, and a lot of sort of wisdom is handed down from the elders, and a lot of the people that are coaching in those sports are coming from an ex-playing background. But also significantly, both of the sports are a very long pathway. You can start playing those sports at a fairly competitive level as young as 6 and 7, and reach your peak 28, 29, or even later now. So they're a long burn, these both of the sports. And over the years, elite coaching changes with the players. You sort of go from when they're young, they're very dependent upon you as a coach, and you're encouraging them to be independent. And then, later on at the higher level, it's an interdependent relationship. So it's changing all the time as you take a player through that pathway. I think some of the features of elite coaching that you might recognize. First of all, you've got to know your stuff in when you're working with elite coaching, and that means as a coach, you're learning all the time, and you're sort of this idea that 70% of one's learning is on the job very much applies in elite coaching, and part of the role that I have is to try and help elite coaches make sense of what they're learning actually, and help them reflect on it. But as well as knowing your stuff, you've also got to know the level in elite coaching, and the knowledge is one thing, but applying it to the right standards is also very significant, and that often differentiates the very successful coaches with those that are sort of not getting there yet, is they know the levels as well as the knowledge and the attention to detail. I think relationships are very similar in sport to business. Elite coaching in sport is very much about developing a relationship, developing trust with the athletes that you work with. It's a person-first approach. You have to really look at the person first. You've got to believe in them, see them as an individual. You can be a brother, sister, uncle, aunt, mother, father, coach. I mean, there's so many different roles. You play with so many different individuals, but it's all around developing really, really good relationships there. And I think the thing that comes to mind there, Damion, is the ability to listen. And it's not just audible listening. Elite coaches, listen with their eyes a lot. They're very aware of when the player is up or down, tired, full of energy, needs a particular different approach. So they're very, very, they're listening a lot to the player in many, many different ways. Elite coaching, sort of thinking of the differences between business coaching and elite coaching.
Yeah.
In sports coaching, players demand a certain approach, and it's very much based around the very short-termism. The next match is on the weekend, or the next tournament is in 3 weeks' time. And they demand often the coaches to push them very hard. And they actually like being pushed hard because it's a little bit short term. One of the key differences between tennis and football is that in a high level tennis, the player actually employs the coach, whereas in high level football, the club employs the coach. So that changes the dynamic as well. So certainly in tennis, if a player wants the coach to push them and give them the answer and solve their problems for them, then that's what the coach does, because the players employing them. So that ability to involve the player in their own learning and create some responsibility with them, and creating awareness is very subtly introduced by the best coaches, actually. I kind of see elite coaching. There's three. I mentioned earlier the brother-sister type roles, but there's three main technical roles, and one is a teacher, where you are a skill developer. You're working a lot on technique. You're using questioning a lot to involve the player in their own thinking and the development of these skills. This is often high volume, lower intensity work. It's where you really develop the detail around the game. And then you've got the trainer, who's much more, more motivational, driving, pushing the players to the edge of their competency, really, really pushing them very, very hard. The player doesn't have much say in this, that, only that it's consensual, and they want to be pushed hard. And then you've got the role of the match day coach, and that's a coach that's more analytical, is able to sit back, watch an opponent, watch a match. You have to be very aware of the pressure that the players are under when they're at that point of competition. Very aware of the mood, and push the right buttons. And the really elite coaching, they have to have all of those skills. Some individual coaches have different ones. Some are better trainers rather than teachers, and vice versa. But they are different roles, and that's elite coaching. And I think the final thing I would say about elite sports coaching is, if you were to take a pie chart and divide it three ways, 25% is what you know, 25% is what you do, but 50% is who you are. Your ability to communicate, your ability to motivate, your fundamental moral values, your competitiveness, your humility. That's a big part of really truly elite coaching. So it's kind of a sort of a whistle-stop tour around some of the features of elite coaching.
Thanks, Simon. And in terms of, because I imagine, again, I imagine just from my sort of brief work in elite sport, just that sort of sense of often the player or the team having the sort of multidisciplinary teams around them. So I just wonder, I imagine there's a lot of pressure on the coach in terms of how they're working alongside the other professionals as well with the players. Is that true? Or
Yes, absolutely. And this is an evolution in elite sport, actually,
mm-hmm.
it wasn't so long ago that the relationship was just with the coach and player. And then there was the introduction of the strength conditioning coach.
Mm-hmm.
But now an elite sports coach, an elite athlete actually is surrounded by physiotherapists, doctors, nutritionists, psychologists, analysts, specialist coaches, individual coaches, tactical coaches, and there is there is a lot of people around an elite athlete, and very often they create that themselves. So certainly in America, there may be, for example, in basketball, the athlete plays for the team, and the team's got its own support. But also in their desire to be better, the athlete also employs his own support. So there's a huge amount of people, and one of the great challenges and one of the skills of the future for coaches is to be able to manage all that, and to it's a greater skill required than ever before, because the coach often is the sort of the CEO of that mini business.
Mm.
And leadership responsibilities and ensuring there's good communication and conflict management, and those sorts of aspects are new skills that elite coaching have. Yeah, but it's a really key feature.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. And again, you started to sort of talk about the differences there, but also just building on that based on your experiences of sort of training in as a leadership coach, etc. as well. What other differences are you seeing now between sort of business coaching and elite sports coaching?
Yes, I mean, thank you for. I should have said thank you for your introduction earlier. But one of the things I wanted to add, of course, is I'm currently on the diploma with
Mm.
you, on the transformational coaching diploma. So, and I'm really enjoying, having spent a life in elite sport, seeing the complementary skills required across the business, what broadly determining, describing as business coaching and sport. They're very, very complementary skills.
Mm-mm.
I think in sport, the expectation of the coachee and the outcomes are clearer.
Mm-mm.
Very, one of the things that sort of my supervision group reports is that sometimes the coachee doesn't quite know where they want to go with the coaching, whereas in sport it's very clear they want to win. And in an individual sport like tennis, they engage someone who they think can help them win. So that's clear. I think business coaching is a sort of a more adult type view rather than the parent and child. In business coaching, you would leave responsibility more with the coachee. Whereas, again, as I've alluded to before, the athletes often want to be told, they want the problem solved for them. And actually, in terms of transactional analysis, many successful coaches on the international tennis tour have actually been the parents.
Yeah.
And there are several reasons for that, but one of them is it actually is effective. So in professional tennis, that does give you an insight into the sort of relationship that goes on there. I think that both, again, separate, this is calling it business coaching, sports coaching. The concept of challenge is the same, but the challenge comes in different ways.
Okay.
So, business coaching, I'm feeling the challenge is actually quite cognitive, and really looking into yourself from a character perspective. Whereas in sports coaching, the challenge can be quite physical, but as well as cognitive and mental. But it is in both environments, the concept of challenge and pushing the person at the right time to develop them, I think, is the same. It's just done differently. Building confidence is the same. This was something that coming into business coaching from sports coaching, I really recognize this. I mean, in sports coaching, you're all about elite coaching is all about building confidence. It's actually the foundation blocks for everything. There's no confidence, there's no progress. So building confidence in them, building belief in players and athletes, and supporting them is huge in sport. And coming into the business world, aspects like appreciative inquiry and strength-based coaching, I recognized all of that. That was very common ground in top sports coaching. Relationships are the same. I think building a strong relationship of trust. Possibly the difference in sports coaching is, especially in professional tennis, you could be with the player for, you can travel on tour with the player for 3 or 4 weeks and be in their pockets all day, every day. So, that really puts, if the relationship's not good, that strains. But it's important to have relationships just the same. So those are a few of the things that I've noticed.
Thank you. And I suppose just sort of with your experience of both, I suppose I'm just quite keen to understand, because earlier you said, that and these are my words, but perhaps a coach might be moving to more of that inquiry base with the player, subtly. So I'm just wondering, based on your experiences, if you were looking back now, what might you have done differently in terms of the way that you coached in the past, now knowing what you know?
Many things.
Yeah.
But I would have done it still. So I would have still got on the journey. I mean, of course, I think a lot about this. Working with other coaches now, it gives me a chance to reflect more on what I did as a coach. And I think, as a younger coach, I think one of the things that I found was I felt I had to know. You're rather insecure when you're a younger coach. You have to know. You think the players want you to know. So the lesson I learned from that was, if I could turn back time and rewind, I would have asked a lot more questions when I was younger, because I've realized that vulnerability is a strength now, and not a weakness. So I would have really asked many more questions when I was younger. And indeed ask the players as well, really say, well, what do you want from this? And leading into that, it's sort of, I'm really becoming absorbed in the contracting aspect of business coaching. I would have contracted better with players, actually, rather than assuming instantly this is what they needed. They've come to me for coaching, and this is what they need. So really helping them understand how I am, them talking to me about how they are, how the relationship's going to work, and not assuming. I think I would have started with the person more. So when I look back on the successful relationships that I had in coaching, I really was an expert on the person, and one way to do that was to open myself up more to them. My most successful relationships, one of the players lived with my family for a while, and another one of the successful players that I worked with became the godmother of my son. So, that in those instances where you open your life up to them, they open theirs up to you, and to get to know them more. I would have definitely been more resilient. What tended to happen when I was younger, was things didn't work, I didn't try them again. Okay. Whereas actually learning to, I've learned that the learning is in failure. And that's actually where you can get a lot better. So, looking back, those are some of the things I would change. And I suppose the final thing is, the thing that I probably regret the most looking back is when I actually, and it's not unusual in sports coaching, this, and we used to call it take the player to the bollocking shed. That's how we used to phrase it, and that never worked. It was something that is almost for the coach's purpose rather than for the individuals themselves, and sort of learning much more about intention in on the diploma I'm doing with you guys, and actually who's it for, and what and what's it for. And coaching can be very much about, well, your attitude wasn't good enough, and I'm going to sort it out. And that when I was a younger coach, that never worked. Unfortunately, I learned that lesson very early, and would like to think I didn't make too many mistakes in that area. But lots of things that I'm sure people on the listening in would possibly recognise in other fields.
I'm sure, and there's a lot of, like you said, resonance and synergies in terms of experiences a lot of people face as well as they're moving more into a business coaching role as well, in terms of needing to be the expert, etc. So how about your work now with developing coaches, Simon? I'm just curious in terms of, how has, I suppose, the way that you obviously your experiences, your career, and also then meeting business coaching. I just wonder how that's influencing at all what you're doing now with other coaches.
Well, my work in the business coach area field is really helping me with how I work with other coaches, and it's given me many more different ways of looking at how I can work with them. In sport, there are just like the coach athlete relationship, where the coach tells and the athlete listens. There can often be an expectation in the coach developer world where the coach developer is the expert and the coach listens.
Sure.
And more of the sort of the mentor, wise, experienced person. And there is an element of that in my practice, and because that's one of the things that the coaches that I'm working with want from me. But what the business coaching world is helping me do is to coach them more, and certainly raise their awareness of things and trust that coaching process. And I found that although the diploma is called transformational coaching, I'm finding doing it is transformational for me in that respect.
In what way, Simon?
Well, in as much as the ability to just raise the thinking of the coaches, and just leave it with them, and then seeing what the feedback is, and seeing the changes in their behaviours because of it. And in one way, it's less work. Not that I'm looking for less work, but it's a lot. It's easier by trusting the coaching process with them. And I find the blend of those two things really powerful. And certainly, business world giving me a lot more tools and skills to work with in that area. I think the athlete to coach has been a real common relationship in sport, as we know, for many years, and of late, coach developer to coach, it's supporting the people that support the athletes. It's a relatively newer profession, whereas in the business world, supervision is a permanent fixture. So in a way, what's happening as a coach developer is you're providing the supervisory environment for the coach as well. So I can see the two. You can see the way in my mind that the things are blending really well.
Definitely. I just wanted to pick up a reflection from PO, if that's okay. So PO's just put, I have the same experience that athletes want to be told quite often. I wonder if it's because they are used to it or if they really want it. And I appreciate you that bit, but I just wanted to come back to that, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yes, PO. I think it's a bit of both, and that's the way it's always been done. So that's the way they expect it. If the coaches have always been telling them, for somebody then not to tell them is quite alien to them. The other element to this is that the coaches of today were the players of the past in many instances, certainly in tennis and football. So if you were coached in a certain way, you then tend to coach in a certain way. So it's breaking that cycle is a really important thing in my mind when I'm working with them.
Mm.
But they do also want it. If a player is highly strung, there's an important tournament coming up. It's the right thing. It's the right thing at the right time as we know in coaching, the right information at the right time and in the right place. And sometimes the player needs to be told, and that's what they want. So balancing all of those things out and trying to get a blend of them is the skill, I think. It's a really good question, that.
Well, and it links back to your point about intentionality as well, in terms of your intention as the coach. So we've got a couple of minutes left. I just want to sort of ask you a question about future focus. So just in terms of how you see coaching an elite sport, what are perhaps a couple of things that you think in terms of that coaches need to pay attention to?
Yeah, well, the coach of 10 years' time is always sort of really current when I'm working with coaches, because I'm trying to get them to think of the future. I think the modern player, the Generation Z, millennial type player, modern players need modern coaches. And that doesn't mean modern players need young coaches. But there is a difference in the way in which we need to coach these young players of today. They like to have, they're very individual, even in team contexts. There's a lot of research around Generation Z that we pay a lot of attention to in football. They like to have a mentor type feel, that somebody's looking out for them individually. They're very, very digital natives, actually. So, their language can be slightly different to the language of an older coach. So I think when I say modern coaches, modern players, it doesn't mean young coaches. It means older coaches need to think, and adapt the way in which they're working a little bit. I think the coach of the future has to be able to get insights from data, because data's everywhere now, and interpreting it and prioritizing it and using it is something that the players expect them to be able to do. I think coaches are going to understand sports psychology more, not pass the player to the sports psychologist for a remedial fix, but to understand how to integrate it into good coaching psychology. But in all of that, Damion, the values of the past still stay true to the present. Hard work, commitment, dedication, those sort of what one might term as traditional values, they're as true today as they ever were. So, but I think the coach of the future will look slightly different in his skill set and his knowledge.
Thank you. Well, and an even more focus, I imagine, on the interpersonal capability that you've been talking about all the way through.
Absolutely.
So just anything else, Simon, just to close, we're so out of time, but just so much here I'd like to talk more to you about, but just anything you'd like to just offer just before we close, really. Anything else I haven't asked you?
Well, no. Well, we've talked about a lot. I mean, I certainly enjoy working with diverse people on the diploma, and actually seeing how the worlds of sport and the world of business are very similar, actually, in the way in which you work with people, and how much the different worlds can learn from each other. The way in which questions are developed, incisive questioning in business, that can be used a lot more in sport. And the thing that comes to mind, Damion, is very often in sport we will use a lot of questioning to help the players understand, but then we will solve the problems for them with the drills and the exercises we give them. So, the world of working in the business coaching world has helped me to see that a lot better, because the drills, the setup, the training setup actually does solve the problem for them. And in many ways, you want the players to solve the problem themselves, because in the pressure of of a high performance sports arena, decision making and problem solving is something you need to equip the athletes with as much as possible.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Simon. And I know from my own experience when I first trained with John Whitmore and David Hemery and David Whitaker from hockey, etc. There was that sort of merging of the two fields, and that's why I really appreciate our work and our conversations as well. So really, thank you for making this time today. I really hope that was an interesting discussion for everyone listening in. Thanks for engaging in the conversation with us. Just to say, our next webinar will be on the 5th of July at 12:30 UK time. This will be on the listening shift. It's a title of a new book that's written by a colleague of mine, Janie Van Hall. So I do hope you can join that session as well. But in the meantime, thanks again, Simon. And
Thank you, Damion.
yeah, thanks to everybody else for dialing in, and hopefully connect again soon. Okay, bye.